It is my eternal and great, great, great honor, I have to tell you, to serve with this most extraordinary human being and American and leader, our President, Joe Biden.
The guy we're running against, what's his name? Donald Dump.
Kamala Harris side by side with President Biden today in their first official appearance together since he exited the 2024 race and Harris became the Democratic nominee. The two unveiled a new milestone in the administration's efforts to lower prescription drug prices. Biden has largely stayed out of the spotlight for the last few weeks, while energy for Harris surges and she continues to campaign. It's a pivotal moment for both Biden as he transitions into his final months in office, going from candidate to supporter, and Harris soon to step on stage as the Democratic nominee at the party's convention next week. Here to talk about this story and more, The Hill's Alex Gangitano. Alex, thanks for being on. Talk about the dynamic playing out between Harris and Biden now that she's on the top of the ticket. What's changed?
Yeah, the dynamics are definitely being closely watched here because of this incredible, change over the last month that we've seen. The president, as you mentioned, of course, exited the race. He quickly endorsed his Vice President Harris, and she has seen an extraordinary amount of momentum behind her candidacy as the Democratic nominee. So we saw them in their first campaign appearance in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. They came out on the stage together, all smiles, cheering along with the crowd, waving. They definitely showed a united front, showed that these two have been partners on the administration front. I definitely think that they're trying to show that there's no hard feelings here, that this is President Biden's choice to hand select her. Maybe there are complications about, if it was his choice to actually drop out of the race. He felt pressure from other Democrats like President Obama, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. During those 3 weeks of kind of turmoil, Vice President Harris really stood behind him and supported him. And so she has not been considered one of the Democrats who pushed him out, but she's the Democrat that now, gets to benefit from him stepping aside. So I think the two of them want to show partnership and unity, that they made this decision on a united front. Meanwhile, his feelings about Democrats outside of this, White House may be more complicated, but he wants to show 100% support of her during her candidacy.
High-stakes ceasefire talks begin today in Doha as tensions in the Middle East escalate after Iran and Hezbollah vowed to retaliate against Israel. A deal will no doubt be tough, and Hamas is not expected to be at the negotiating table. But President Biden insists he is not giving up. What's realistic for these talks, Alex, and how much does Biden want this as part of his legacy as his time in office is dwindling?
Yeah, this is a huge thing that the president wants for his legacy, something that he's been pushing for several months now, trying to get this hostage deal in place. Of course, the U.S., as we know, with these talks going on this week, has been so involved. And this would be a huge thing for his legacy if he could get it accomplished before January. The death toll in Gaza, according to the Ministry of Health there, is rising up to some 40,000 people. All of this is also not looking good on his legacy in terms of how progressives, the Muslim and Arab American community in the U.S. are treating him. Of course, we've seen protests following him around the country and now around Vice President Harris. And so as tensions there get even worse, the death toll rises. These are all reasons why the president and the vice president want this conflict to end. So they're really pushing for these talks to be successful. As you mentioned, the Hamas agreeing to this is really an uphill battle. So we'll see if they can get any further along this week. But of course, this is something that the White House is really serious about accomplishing.
Tireless efforts for all involved. Now turning to the campaign, former President Trump has already disowned the controversial Project 2025, but Democrats aren't letting go, trying to tie the project's most controversial ideas to the GOP. Why do Democrats think this will work, even after Trump said Project 2025 has no connection to his campaign?
Yeah, it's really coming down to a messaging campaign. And of course, a lot of, Harris supporters listen to what she has to say. Trump supporters listen to what he has to say. So if Harris campaign keeps, hitting him over Project 2025, you hear her during speeches, you hear President Biden beforehand during speeches talk about Project 2025 time and time again and bringing up, their criticism of this and associating Trump to it, saying this will definitely happen if Trump gets elected again. These are all reasons why, Democrats believe them. They just keep harping on this. As much as the former president disavows this and wants to separate himself from this effort, I think as long as Democrats keep up the drumbeat, people are going to assume that this is part of his agenda for the future. But we have definitely seen the Trump campaign say that they are not involved in Project 2025, and nor do they want to be associated with it. But it definitely comes down to, who is coming across to voters louder. Are people believing Trump when he separates himself from this? Or are they believing Harris when she argues that even if he separates himself, this is what a future Trump administration would look like?
Democrats are persistent on that one. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is set to give a speech Friday in the battleground state of North Carolina, where she will lay out her vision for the economy if she's elected president. Alex, what is expected, and do we anticipate specifics or just broad brushstrokes here?
Yeah, I think voters are ready for her to get into the specifics. Of course, the first couple weeks of her campaign was exciting. She was talking about these broad brushstrokes, things like, bringing joy back into politics, and of course, painting Trump and Senator J.D. Vance as weird. These are all moments to energize the base. And now I think people are ready for her to get into the specifics. So she'll be talking about lowering prices. She'll be talking about combating price gouging, whether that's at the grocery store or healthcare costs. These are all things that are extensions of the work of the Biden administration that she wants to build upon. And I think she knows that, voters want to hear specific examples, because definitely if you're an independent, a moderate, an undecided voter who doesn't think that the Biden economy is working for you, she needs to come up with some new ideas to attract those voters, or else they're just going to assume that, the economy will keep working under a Harris administration just like it does under a Biden administration. Of course, she has a tough rope to walk, because she doesn't want to, be too critical of her boss, President Biden, but she also wants to come up with some new ideas and outline them to people so that they look at this as new plans and new hope for the future for their families, as opposed to, just an extension of what we've been seeing.
Now, over on Trump's side, close advisors and Republicans are urging the former president to stick to policy debates like the economy and drop the personal insults against Harris, now that the latest polling has shown Harris has taken leads in several battleground states. But so far, he's not heeding to their advice. Instead, Trump is holding a press conference today. It seems like his strategy is essentially more Trump. Could this end up backfiring?
Yeah, it worked for him in 2016 to be as much Trump as he wants to be. 2020, it did not. So we'll see, if it could work again in 2024. But you're absolutely right. Republicans and some advisors have told him, stick to politics, stick to laying out your policy plans. People want to hear what you want to do on immigration, what you want to do on combating crime, what you want to do on the economy, as opposed to hearing criticism, personal insults about Vice President Harris, which could veer in the direction of racist and sexist if you're not careful about it. And so he, runs into this tricky territory. But like you've mentioned, he's going to do this press conference in New Jersey. We saw him do a 2-hour interview with Elon Musk on X. We've seen him call into Fox and Friends. These are all very Trumpy moments, so to say. And so he's definitely leaning into just his brand, leaning into appeal to his base, and we'll see if it backfires for him or if this is something that will, excite Republicans behind him.
Republicans are zeroing in on Tim Walz's military record in the National Guard, arguing he exaggerated his military service. Walz has pushed back hard on this, and now a group of veterans has penned a letter supporting Walz and are denouncing the Republican attacks. How big of an issue is this becoming in the campaign? Are there signs it's resonating with voters?
No, I do think voters are definitely interested in looking at that these are two veterans, what their records are. And I think when Vance came out and attacked Walz for his record, claiming that he was exaggerated about his service, voters were definitely interested in looking into this and looking into why Walz would attack somebody on this level. Of course, the military service is something that's a great attribute for somebody who's running for the vice presidency. We saw Walz this week come hit back at Vance during a speech and say nobody should ever denigrate somebody else's military service. And I do think Americans resonated with that as well. There are Americans that have joined the military on many different levels and are still, entitled to our respect. And so I think this back and forth, people are interested in seeing how this goes and where this goes. And of course, it sets up just an interesting side by side with these two vice presidents, these two men that are trying, to be the second in command, that they're going head to head over this issue that is so personal to people. And of course, something that people, can either find highly disrespectful one way or another if they, want to side with Vance or Walz on this issue. So it'll be interesting how it plays out, but it does so far look like both men have been discussing it in all of their speeches. Of course, we have a debate coming up, so I'm sure it'll be another topic of conversation.
That's right. Talk about that side-by-side moment. Both Walz and Vance have agreed to face off on the debate stage coming up on October 1st. There had been some questions if they would actually go head-to-head and engage in a debate before the November election. Alex, how much will this showdown between the VP picks actually matter?
Yeah, there's obviously historical examples of times that the vice president has mattered, a vice president debate has mattered, and then other times when it hasn't. Even Vice President Harris, when she went head to head against former Vice President Mike Pence, those created some viral moments and people were able to see a lot of both of their personality coming out, which was really interesting. I think that things are also so, divided right now. People are so plugged into this election that it will be a highly watched debate. I think both of these contenders have, they have military backgrounds. They're also both from the Midwest. I think, both of them are either considered, Tim Walz is considered progressive. J.D. Vance is considered, part of the MAGA movement. So they're definitely two, people that are fascinating for Americans to watch go head to head. So I think in this case, it does matter. We'll see how much of their personalities, though, come out during the debate. And of course, a debate between former President Trump and Vice President Harris will be, even obviously the bigger show, but I think people want to know more about these two and want to see how they can go up against one another.
Certainly quite big events on the political calendar. Now here in Washington, the leaders of the House task force to investigate the assassination attempt against Trump are trying to speed up their work. And lawmakers involved are aiming to keep the work strictly bipartisan. What is actually expected out of this task force and what kind of timeline are lawmakers working with, Alex?
Yeah, it does seem like they're moving very fast with this task force. Congressman Mike Kelly, a Republican, and Congressman Jason Crow, a Democrat, are both working on this, trying to make it a bipartisan event. They also want to hear from principals at Homeland Security and the FBI by August 16th. So this is a quick moving timeline. They're definitely trying to get some answers right away. And this is such a huge story, of the year of this election cycle. And people do want answers about what went wrong. So their timeline is quick. And I think we're going to see lawmakers from both sides of the aisle really want to push ahead and figure out what went on that day because of the interest, but also because of the safety concerns. There's implications for everybody in politics if the safety protocols just aren't there. And so they definitely want to get some answers.
Focusing back on 2024 here, at this point, Elon Musk is emerging as a large figure in this year's presidential campaign. He's using the social media platform he owns, X, to promote Trump and disparage Democrats. He's formed a political action committee where he can put his fortune to work helping the former president. How have Democrats responded to Musk's stepped up political activities? And are there any signs they are actually helping Trump?
During the interview with Trump, we definitely saw the former president talk more about policy than he typically does. He didn't cause anything that was extremely controversial. So there could be some positive takeaways, but I do think it also gave Democrats a lot of ability to, criticize the fact that these two are kind of teaming up for this interview, and that the former president, is only willing to speak to somebody like Musk, somebody who's supportive of him, including, media like Fox News and wherever else. I think Democrats are quick to disavow what happened here with this interview and just Musk's involvement overall in trying to influence politics. They've definitely been critical of him on that front. But any sort of clips out of this interview between comments from Trump, comments from Musk, I think Democrats are ready to use that as on the campaign trail as a way to criticize what went on and show, Americans that powerful men like Elon Musk want to influence politics. That's, of course, been a talking point of the Democratic Party for a long time. And so it gives them some more talking points on the campaign trail as well.
Breaking this morning, the president of Columbia University has resigned, months after protests over the war in Gaza roiled the campus. She was criticized by pro-Palestinian activists, and Republicans accused her of failing to act on reports of anti-Semitism on campus. Alex, is there much reaction from lawmakers here in Washington today in light of this resignation?
We saw Republican lawmakers right away celebrate this, say that it was too long overdue. Some of those were New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Speaker Mike Johnson. These are people that were highly critical of the college protests going on last spring, and were eager to see, some people, including, the president of a major university, take the fall for what happened. Of course, that was a massive story, back in May when this was all going on. It really consumed, the media. And it consumed, the conversation on Capitol Hill over, protesters and freedom of speech and how far is too far. Even President Biden got involved and, disavowed these protesters when they leaned into anti-Semitism or leaned into, breaking and entering or harming school property. And so this was such a controversial topic. So as Republicans in particular have definitely been excited today to see that somebody, took the fall for this, and in particular, the Columbia president.
Attorneys for Trump asked the judge overseeing the former president's Manhattan criminal case to postpone his sentencing, now set for September 18th, until after the November election. Trump has repeatedly tried to use this stalling tactic across his criminal cases. Alex, how much are voters paying attention here?
There is so much going on with this election that I do think Trump's legal issues kind of are on the back burner for the last few months, between the debate performance of President Biden and then the fallout from that, the disarray in the Democratic Party over if he should stay on the ticket. Then, of course, Vice President Harris becoming the top of the ticket and gaining so much momentum. With all of that going on, Trump's legal issues haven't been the main focus, but something like this criminal case going on before the election would put it back into focus. And I do think Americans are interested to see what happens in these criminal cases. And they want to, they're curious what exactly Trump did. So any reminder that he has these lingering legal issues, I think, are an issue for him. So the fact that he wants to push this until after the election, just so it's not top of mind for voters, makes sense for him as a strategy, because it's definitely true that, when these legal cases are at the forefront, there is so much interest in them. But just lately, they, haven't been the topic of this election. And I think Donald Trump has definitely been enjoying that for the time being.
RFK Jr. is looking past the 2024 election and is reportedly trying to seek a meeting with Kamala Harris, hoping to make a deal where he would secure a job in her administration in exchange for an endorsement. At this point, we already know about the push to try and set up a meeting with Trump at the RNC to discuss a similar proposal. Alex, is Harris expected to circle back and engage at all with RFK Jr. here?
When I spoke with, Democrats today and people familiar with his outreach to Harris, it seemed like there is absolutely no room for him in a future Harris cabinet, and they are not interested in engaging with him, let alone, working with him. They, definitely think that he's part of the MAGA movement, so to speak, when some of these people have talked to me, and they associate him with Trump and don't want anything to do with him, to be perfectly blunt. And we did see, he posted, Kennedy on X today, that he will not be endorsing Harris, and that his father and uncle would be embarrassed of the way that the Democratic Party looks right now. So there's definitely hard feelings on both sides. So I don't think the two coming together in the future really is something that we can expect. We'll see if the Trump campaign, starts to associate themselves more with him. But we have seen some polling that shows that since Harris has come into the race, Kennedy actually is emerging as more of a spoiler for Trump, whereas previously when it was Biden versus Trump, he was a spoiler for Biden. So I'm sure the Trump campaign also is trying to figure out strategy to either get him to drop out and endorse him, or how to make it so that he's not taking away votes from the former president.
Kennedy on the job hunt. Thank you so much. The Hill's Alex Gangitano. The enthusiasm behind Vice President Harris's campaign has pushed her ahead of former President Trump in the polls. According to a new survey from Emerson College Polling, the vice president now holds a 4-point lead over Trump, a dramatic shift from the President Biden's polling out just a month ago. To break down the latest data, we're bringing in Senior Director of Emerson College Polling, Matt Taglia. Matt, the last time Emerson did a national poll, Biden was still the candidate. Now there's a new ticket, and Democrats are in a clear lead for the first time since this election cycle began. Now, from which groups is Harris picking up that support? Walk us through some of these crosstabs.
Sure. So as you said, we see Harris now in the lead compared to where Biden was in July. So she is at +4 over Trump among likely voters now. And in July, we saw that Biden was down by about 2 points among likely voters. And I think what we're seeing here is the shift that we had maybe anticipated would happen at some point for Biden, but we're now fully seeing with Harris. And these are some of these traditional Democratic demographics that are coming home, so to speak. So Harris is now winning substantially among younger voters. So those who are 18 to 29, she gets 65% of the vote. Among Hispanic voters, she's winning 58%. And among African-American voters, she's winning 80%. We're also seeing that older voters are starting to poll for Harris with 51%, and independents. We see she is at 47% versus 45% for former President Trump. And I think we see mostly movement away from undecided and these third-party candidates that some of these other folks were backing previously, maybe sitting on the bench, and now they are coming back to the Democratic Party. We can also see, looking a little bit further down, the favorability numbers for the vice presidential candidates, 39% favorable for J.D. Vance versus 49% unfavorable. And then for Tim Walz, it's 39% favorable versus 39% unfavorable. So I think that they're also clearly having some maybe marginal impact at the top of the ticket. But overall, I think that this is very good news for the Harris campaign. And these numbers are starting to look a lot more like the 2020 election results nationally.
Certainly, they are going as well as Harris could hope for at this point in her campaign. Now, your survey looked at some congressional races, too. According to these numbers, 48% said they would likely support the Democratic candidate for Congress, while 46% said they would likely support the Republican. Compare that to past polling for us. Is there new support behind Harris helping down ballot candidates?
Yeah, I think to some degree. So we saw in the previous July poll that 44% supported the Democratic candidate versus 43% for the Republican candidate. So this is a little bit like the top of the ticket. We're seeing some marginal movement that's sort of slight. We're seeing a lot more movement away from undecided and towards one of the two parties. So it might not be quite the boon that some would hope, given the Harris number at the top of the ticket. But we see some similar demographic trends. So 65% among 18 to 29-year-olds, 81% of African-American voters are supporting Democrats, and 57% of Hispanics are doing the same. However, Republicans are actually winning among the Republican generic congressional candidate with about 42% of the vote. So tighter margins in these congressional races. There are definitely going to be some competitive seats up for grabs, but I would not say that either party has a national edge right now.
Now, the economy continues to be the top issue for voters. About 40% say their number one issue is the economy. That's up about 10% compared to your national poll 6 months ago. Are you seeing that issue swing voters to one side or the other?
I think to some degree, yes. So the economy has consistently been a top issue, and that's across demographics for roughly the past 6 months, as you said, but it has ticked up. And Trump wins these voters overall. 56% of folks who say that the economy is their top issue say that they also intend to support former President Trump at the top of the ticket, compared to 38% who support Harris. But this is a lower margin than we've seen before. I think Harris is a little bit more competitive than Biden was on these numbers. And if we take a look and expand a bit to housing affordability, that's another big element. Even though only 7% say that it's their top issue, I think that they go hand in hand, especially among younger voters. And that could be why we're seeing some of that movement from your younger voters towards Vice President Harris. But then when we look at immigration, that's the second biggest issue, 17%. So Trump wins these voters overwhelmingly with 88%. So I think that there are positives and negatives for each candidate in these issues. But immigration is certainly a liability, it seems, for the Harris campaign.
Now, a different topic here. The Olympics just wrapped up in Paris, but you are already looking ahead to LA. Are you expecting people to get excited for the games in 4 years?
Yeah, so we asked voters whether they are excited about the Olympics being held in Los Angeles, and we saw that about 3 in 5 voters overall are excited for the Olympics to be held in LA in 2028. 40% are not really excited. Democrats are most excited about the Olympic location. So 76% are excited compared to 54% of independents, 47% of Republicans. And younger voters tend to be more excited than older voters. Now, we also asked whether folks have confidence in the ability of the city of Los Angeles to host the games, and most say that they're at least somewhat confident that LA will be able to successfully host the games. I know that this isn't necessarily of huge political importance right now, but looking ahead, 4 years from now, 2028, it'll be another presidential election year, and so this might matter a little bit more then.
Yes, and LA has a little bit of work to do to get prepared for that time. All right, the Emerson's Matt Taglia, thank you.
Thank you.
Ukrainian forces have taken control of a key town in the Russian border region of Kursk, according to President Vladimir Zelensky. This comes after a surprise attack on the Kursk region by Ukrainian troops, which claim to have taken almost 400 square miles of Russian territory. The town is the largest that Ukraine has reportedly seized so far during its incursion. Ukraine's offensive into the Kursk region is seen as a major embarrassment for the Kremlin and signals a shift in strategy for Kyiv in their ongoing war with Russia. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is threatening to sue the city of Dallas over a new policy prohibiting open and concealed carry of firearms at the state fair next month. The State Fair of Texas is held by a nonprofit organization that enacted the new policy after a shooting took place last year during the fair that injured 3 people. But in the letter sent to the city of Dallas, Paxton says the city has 15 days to reverse the policy, or his office will sue for injunctive relief and seek civil penalties. The Texas Attorney General argued that since the state fair is happening on land owned by the city of Dallas, the event falls under the scope of laws that prohibit state governments from prohibiting legal gun owners from accessing property owned by the government. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.